This is Introduction to SAS Programming, and today we are going to start learning SAS. We are going to cover 4 topics in this introductory lecture. We are going to start with SAS structure, talk about constructing SAS statements and comments, briefly look at an example program, and lastly talk about the SAS windows you see when you open SAS on your computer. SAS is a programming language that reads, processes, and performs statistical analysis of data. A SAS program is made up of programming statements, executed in order, which SAS interprets to do the above functions. There are 2 parts to a SAS program. The first part, called the data step, contains statements that read in and process your raw data and makes what is called a SAS data set. In the data step, you can also create new variables based on the data read in. These new variables will be included on the data set. The second part of a SAS program contains statements that read your SAS data set and perform specific statistical analyses. These are called procedures or procs. Most procedures do a certain type of analyses. This ranges from simple procedures that compute the average values of your numeric variables to procedures that perform analysis of variance. There are also a few procedures that perform some sort of utility, like sorting your data set. Your program will often have just one data step, but you may have several procedure calls. Here is a graphic to illustrate the processes related to your SAS program. You start with raw data that got entered into the computer. There are many ways the data can be entered and stored into the computer, and we will be talking about that. The first step in your program will be to read your data into SAS and create a SAS data set. This part of your program is called the data step. Within the data step, you can also add new variables based on the data read in. The data step also outputs your data to a SAS data set. A SAS data set is a special kind of file that contains your data. To do analyses, your data must be in a SAS data set. Once you have your data into a SAS data set, you can then run analyses using one of the many SAS procedures. Running procedures, or procs, is usually the easy part. The sometimes more difficult part is reading in your data and getting it ready for the procedure. This part, called the data step, is the emphasis of this course. We will, however, cover many of the common procedures used. Before looking at a SAS program, let's make sure we understand the structure of data and some of the terms SAS uses to describe data. Data is made up of rows and columns. This structure is found both in the raw data and in a SAS data set. Rows in SAS are referred to as observations. Columns in SAS are referred to as variables. The rows and columns together make up the data set, sometimes called a data table. An observation is all the information for one entity, for one patient or one patient visit, or one clinical center or one county. SAS processes data one observation at a time. This will become important as we study the data step. Here is an example of a data set. It has 10 rows, or observations, and 5 columns, or variables. This is made-up data of 10 students. The variables are gender, age, marital status, number of course credits, and state of residence of each student. When we bring this data into SAS, we will assign variable names to each of the columns of data. As far as SAS is concerned, there are 2 types of variables, numeric and character. Numeric variables contain data you would compute an average for, such as age or blood pressure. Character variables contain alphanumeric data or are numbers where taking an average would have no meaning. Examples include a patient ID, a medical diagnosis, or code. When you read in your data, you will need to tell SAS which variables are character. The default type is numeric. Here are a few general rules regarding SAS statements. The most important rule is that each statement ends with a semicolon. This is how SAS knows when one statement ends and the next one begins. An omitted semicolon is a common error to make. In this example, there are three statements: a data statement, an in-file statement, and an input statement. Each ends with a semicolon. Next, SAS statements can be entered in upper or lowercase. You can use either lower or uppercase when writing syntax. SAS interprets the statements the same. Multiple SAS statements can be on the same line. Here are two examples. The first has the data, in-file, and input statements on the same line. You would not usually do this because it would be hard to read. However, for SAS, this would be fine. Only the semicolons make a difference. The second example defines four variables and sets them to 0. Since these statements are so short, you might put them on the same line. Lastly, a SAS statement can be written over multiple lines. This can be done if the statement is long or for readability. The input statement, which names the variables that are read in, often takes multiple lines. It is, however, just one statement. Rules for naming SAS variables are pretty simple. They can be from 1 to 32 characters in length, and they must begin with either the letter A to Z or an underscore. Letters, numbers, or an underscore can be used for the second character and on. Special characters like a slash or asterisk are not allowed anywhere in a variable name, nor is a blank. A good practice is to make your variable name as short as possible, but which is still descriptive. I use the variable DBP12 to indicate the diastolic blood pressure at the 12-month visit. Comments make your program easier to read. There are two ways to write comments in SAS. The first way starts with an asterisk and ends with a semicolon. The second way starts with a slash asterisk and ends with an asterisk slash. Comments can be inserted anywhere in your program. SAS doesn't process the comments. Comments appear in green in the SAS editor. I expect you to comment your code on all of your homework assignments. Here is an example of a simple SAS program. We will look at this program in more detail in the demonstration video. I want you to notice it contains the two parts of a SAS program and a comment. When you start SAS, a set of windows will appear. The first window is called the Program Editor window. This is where you type in your program. After you type in your program, you will then need to submit the program. You do this by clicking on the Run icon. This will generate a log in what is called the Log window. The text in the Log window will list the statements processed, giving notes, warnings, and errors. The log contains information about how SAS understood your program. This is very important to look at. Every time you have a question, I will ask, what does your log say? The third window is the Output window. If all goes well, the Output window displays the results from running a program. I want to focus a little bit more on the messages that can appear in your SAS log. There are three types of messages. Errors are just that. The code you submitted was incorrect in some way. SAS could not understand one or more statements. SAS will stop your program and you will usually not get any output. Errors show up in red, and so they are easy to spot. Warnings are messages that are usually important. SAS saw something that was odd in your program, but SAS understood your program well enough to continue. Before looking at your output, you would want to understand the warning. Lastly, there are notes. These give you information about what SAS did, like how many observations were read in, or how much CPU time was used. Notes can sometimes give you important information. If a note tells you 100 observations were read in, but you expected 1,000, then you would want to check your program. A common mistake new SAS programmers make, and old SAS programmers alike, is to ignore the log and go right to the output. This can be a serious mistake. So when you open up SAS, here are the windows that you will see. The video that is posted under Week 1 Introduction demonstrates starting up SAS, running a SAS program, and reviewing the output and the log. I want to leave you with 3 important questions to consider that I stressed in this lecture. Answering these questions and applying them when you write SAS syntax will make your programming tasks easier. Number 1, what is the most important rule to remember about a SAS statement? Number 2, if your program does not run, where should you look first? Number 3, what do you need to include in your SAS code to get full credit for an assignment? Lastly, this link is an excellent starting place to explore SAS Online Help. You can look at complete documentation, ask questions, see example code, and learn about new procedures. I urge you to explore this site when you have a chance.